Hello world, hear the song that we're singing. Come on, get happy. A whole lot of loving is what we'll be bringing. We'll make you happy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another movie spoiler cast with me, Conner Nielsen. But I'm not alone. I am here with the person who owns and runs this channel, the Comics Kid 2099. How you doing, Comics Kid?
I'm doing great. I just saw Ant-Man and the Wasp earlier today, which is the movie that we will be talking about. And Connor, you saw it Thursday night. I guess we can just I can sum up the plot real quick, and then we can get into our thoughts. So this is a sequel to the 2015 movie Ant-Man. It is directed by Peyton Reed and stars Paul Rudd, Evangeline Lilly, with also Michael Douglas, and Michelle Pfeiffer's in there a little bit. We got Walton Goggins in here, and Hannah John-Kamen. So the plot of this movie follows the events of Captain America Civil War, where Ant-Man, or Scott Lang, he helped Captain America and then became a fugitive. And we see that we heard about this in Infinity War, but we see that he basically made a deal with the government where he would be on house arrest for 2 years, and then he would be scot-free. But we find out here that Hank Pym and Hope Van Dyne are still on the run because their technology was used when he helped Captain America, so they are also culpable. And so we are 3 days away from Scott being done with his house arrest, and he gets a dream concerning Hope's mom, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, and so they more or less kidnap him so that he can help them rescue her mom from the quantum realm, which we found out in Ant-Man 1. She was stranded there and possibly had died, but now we're finding out maybe she's not dead. And then corporate espionage character, Ghost, who can phase in and out of reality. She is after the technology that Hope and Hank are trying to get from Walton Goggins, who is a black market technology guy. They're all after the same technology. Walton Goggins, he wants to go into shady business with Hope and Hank. And in Ghost, we find out she needs this technology to save her life because she's dying. And that's pretty much the plot of the movie. It's a little involved, but really it's not as involved as I make it sound. It's hard to explain, but it's a pretty easy to get into movie. I would recommend watching Ant-Man before you watch this, and probably Civil War also. But what did you think of this movie, Connor?
It was okay.
Oh, okay.
Comics Kid, what did you think of this movie?
I liked it. I've been hearing a lot of people say like it's just all right. Seeing some people say that it's a little shallow, but I don't know what you expect from an Ant-Man movie, or what people who say that it's shallow, what they would expect, because I quite liked it. If you'll recall, when the first Ant-Man movie came out, you and I have talked about this off camera at least. I don't know if I've mentioned it on camera. I liked it quite a bit. I went into it with very few expectations, and I was actually sick as a dog when I watched it, but I really enjoyed it, more than the Doctor Strange movie, and I like the character of Doctor Strange in the comics much more than any of the people who have become Ant-Man in the comics. So, like, I thought that was a little strange that I liked the movie Ant-Man a lot more than the movie Doctor Strange, and I still like that movie, and I think this is about on par with that one. So if you liked the first Ant-Man movie, I think you will like this movie. You thought it was just all right?
Yeah, I guess saying what I thought about the first movie before talking about this one is a pretty good segue. I guess, it's in the title, but spoilers from here on out. So the first movie, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes drama. Edgar Wright was supposed to direct that. You can't even mention the first Ant-Man without somebody going in some direction about Edgar Wright. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I went into that almost kind of with a bone to pick for that movie, and I just thought it was fine, and I was kind of annoyed because I was like, oh, this could have been a great movie if only Edgar Wright had made it. And then around the time Civil War came out, I rewatched it because I was watching all the movies leading up to Civil War, and I thought, like a lot of my kind of venom towards that movie, whatever venom was there, had receded. And I was like, you know what? It's not, I wish we would have gotten the Edgar Wright version of this movie, and a part of me still wishes we did. But as far as this movie goes, it's entertaining. It's good enough. It is lightweight, kind of inconsequential in terms of the Marvel Studios movies, but that's fine. You can make lightweight, inconsequential movies that are still fun to watch and are still well made and still tell good stories in and of themselves. So and it's an entertaining movie, I think.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to this movie, I don't like it as much as the first movie. You talk about Doctor Strange, and then there's the first Ant-Man, and both the first Doctor Strange and the first Ant-Man movie. So in terms of my ranking, I have like a bottom 3 movies, which is Iron Man 2, Thor 2, and The Incredible Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a pretty big gap in terms of, because it's like my favorite movie is like a 9 out of 10. It's Civil War, and then going down you get to like your 8s, and then like they bottom out around Doctor Strange and Ant-Man. I both give like 7s.
Okay.
And then I give like The Incredible Hulk a 5. So there's like a 2-point difference that kind of separates my bottom 3 from the rest of the Marvel movies that I think are pretty consistent in quality.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like that big continent of movies that are apart from the bottom 3, Ant-Man and Doctor Strange kind of fight for what's the bottom of that for me.
Mm-hmm.
So this movie is starting to fill that gap. You know, I think I'd give it like a 6 out of 10.
Oh.
But the more I think about it, it's more like a 5. I don't know. But I'm just going to stick with 6. That's what I felt walking out of the movie. That's what I'll just kind of continue to stick with. I don't hate it. I don't even think it's bad. It's above average, I would say. I think the biggest issue I have with it is that I don't think it's particularly well directed.
Okay.
And I think that I maybe should have expected as much, because when you don't have Edgar Wright's storyboards and pre-production to build a movie off of, it's not going to be as good the second time around.
Mm-hmm.
But I was kind of hoping maybe in having Edgar Wright's pre-production the first time around and having a lot of that sort of stuff to build your movie off of the first time around, Peyton Reed might have learned something from that and improved in the second one. And he didn't. It's just kind of a Peyton Reed movie. And if you've never heard of a Peyton Reed movie, that's because he doesn't really have a style. He doesn't really have a whole lot of – I don't think he has a whole lot of momentum and a lot of energy to his stuff. I think a lot of the shot setups are very standard, like reverse shot dialogue scenes. You just kind of aim a camera at somebody in a flat angle, and then when it's somebody's turn to talk, you edit, cut to them in another. I don't know. He's a competent filmmaker, but a lot of other filmmakers we've had, with like Taika Waititi doing Thor Ragnarok and Ryan Coogler doing Black Panther and the Russos doing Infinity War, those, like, for like well over a year now, like we've had the Marvel universes where directors sort of come and they think, how can I tell this story, and like with like how can I like direct this movie with like, and use my imagination to try to come up with something new to tell the story. And I feel like Peyton Reed is like, oh boy, I'm making an Ant-Man movie. And he's excited to be there, but he doesn't really put a lot of thought, he doesn't put as much thought in terms of how he's shooting a scene that a lot of other more current Marvel filmmakers are doing. And I think that in terms of editing, there's not much flair to it. It's just pretty serviceable, standard editing. And I honestly think that the action in the trailer was better edited than the actual movie. I was actually kind of bored. And so I think where this movie does succeed, though, is I didn't find this movie as funny as the Guardians movies. I don't think it's as funny as the first Ant-Man movie. I don't think it's as funny as Infinity War, surprisingly enough. I don't even think it's as funny as like Spider-Man or Thor Ragnarok. But I did find it was humorous. I kind of had a smile on my face. I got a couple of good hearty laughs out of it, though. And I think Paul Rudd's charisma carries a lot of it. I mean, Michael Douglas is always good. But I think that this is a very forgettable movie. And I think that's sort of why I'm a little frustrated with it, is there's not a lot to it.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask you a question, but it sounds like you've kind of already answered it. I was going to ask you, if we hadn't already had Black Panther and Infinity War, which, like, there was a lot of hype for both of those. Infinity War, there's been hype for that since 2012. And then there's been a lot of hype for Black Panther since he showed up in Civil War. And then, people found out he was getting his own movie. And especially when the trailer came out, people were getting hype for that. And those two movies both came out this year. And then Ant-Man kind of follows up. And it would be very difficult to even compare to those movies, let alone top those movies. So I was going to ask, if those movies hadn't come out yet, or if they hadn't come out this year at all, if you would like this more. But it sounds like a lot of your problems with the movie were with the movie and not in comparison with earlier movies this year.
That's right. And it is one of those things where I don't mind that it's more lightweight and less consequential. You can take that and run with it and make something that is good in its own right. Pardon the pun. Its own right. Hey. And it's funny that I say that because I'm thinking about Baby Driver, which was Edgar Wright's last movie. which is just a very isolated, very simple story. Like, it's not this big earth-shattering movie, but it was my second favorite movie of last year because it was just so good at being what it was. And so there's a little frustration because like I see the potential here. I just don't think it does enough with its potential. I do think there's another problem of sequelitis, and not just in like a, oh, it's not as good as the first one sort of way, but in a, we have to find something for everyone in the first movie to do, and we also need to put in more characters.
Yeah. And I liked the, compared to the first movie, I liked the limited amount of time that Luis and those other two guys that they had. I thought that when they were there, they had good stuff to do, but also I didn't need them to be in it as much as they were in the first one. Also, you had the stepdad, whose name I can't remember. He's basically a non-entity here, and everything he did in the first movie is now fulfilled by John Woo, or not John Woo, whatever. Agent Woo's name. I want to
John Woo. I would watch that movie. John
Yeah.
Woo's Ant-Man.
John Woo just doing magic tricks and failing to do magic tricks. Yeah, so you said you don't find it as funny as like Infinity War, and I do. There's a lot of humor in Infinity War I like, but I don't know. Maybe it's because I haven't seen Infinity War in like 2 months, so I don't know. Right off the top of my head, I'm having trouble comparing them, and like in a year, when I have both of these on DVD, I'll be able to watch, all the Phase 3 Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff and kind of compare them better, like, because I could watch all three of them in a week, or like, Black Panther, Infinity War, and this. But, like, I don't know. I was entertained by it. And I agree, like, this does have the thing of, like, you have to add more elements than the first one had. So the first one, in a way, feels more focused because it has fewer balls that it has to juggle than this one does. This kind of reminded me of Deadpool 2 in a good way, in that Deadpool 2, we talked about this, it had a lot of the same jokes from Deadpool 1 and didn't really improve on any of those jokes. Like, there's a thing in Deadpool 1 where he loses his hand and then he has a baby hand, and then in Deadpool 2 he loses his bottom half and then he has baby legs. Haha, it's the same joke. And then there's the thing where he's making crude hand gestures toward Vanessa in the first movie, and then in this one he's making crude hand gestures toward Colossus, and haha, it's the same joke. I kind of feel like this shows Deadpool 2 how you should do a sequel, because there's a couple of times where they're reusing jokes from the first Ant-Man movie, but I feel like they're doing it in just a different enough way that it works. Specifically, I'm thinking of how the character of Luis, his whole thing in the first movie was he would go into telling another character this big drawn-out story with all these details that they didn't care about and usually didn't have anything to do with the story. And he did that 2 times in the first movie, and then in this one, I honestly thought they weren't going to do that. And then the Walton Goggins and his people, they give him a truth serum, and then he starts going into the details again. And I thought it was funny because it's taking that joke from the first movie, but it's just enough of a twist on it that I thought it was worth redoing that joke. And I feel like there's a couple other, like, the chase scene in this movie. You said you didn't think it was as good as the trailer. I think I had seen the trailer. I remember some of the moments in this movie being in the trailer, but I don't know. I was entertained by the action. Usually that's not something I have an opinion on, but I thought the action here was probably better than the first movie. I feel like I don't know, the stakes feel higher, but it doesn't feel unnecessarily higher. You were talking about how, like, Baby Driver is kind of an isolated movie. It doesn't feel like it has to have huge stakes, and I feel like the stakes are bigger than the first Ant-Man movie, but it's not like, hey, we have to save the universe. It's not like, there's a giant beam shooting into the sky and, oh no, the quantum realm is going to explode our entire planet. It's nothing like that. So I liked how much they had raised the stakes without necessarily making it feel like the universe was in jeopardy, if that makes sense.
No, I get that, and I like that about this movie too.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the Luis gag, Michael Pena is like my favorite character in these movies.
Mm-hmm.
I just like Michael Pena in general, but I usually don't like it when he's in comedy movies. But I think he's a really good actor. I know a lot of people don't like the movie Crash. It's not that great, but he's really good in it. And so I thought his sort of like, his gag where he's sort of telling a story and you kind of like do a whoosh whoosh and you're looking at the story that he's telling,
mm-hmm.
and he's kind of narrating everyone's voices. And that's a lot of fun, and I really like that stuff. And I think that was probably my favorite gag from the first movie too.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, like, I was kind of hoping we'd get it this movie, and then when we got it, I found it kind of tired. Like, I feel like we just sort of did it because it was in the first movie and people liked it. I didn't really get as much of a like a like it didn't get as much of a kick out of me as I was kind of hoping it would. And when I think about the first movie in terms of like the action, I think of that cool part where Ant-Man jumps onto a person's gun and then runs through the gun and then jumps, and while he's jumping he turns back to normal size and grabs the person's tie and throws them through a window. Like I think it's stuff like that and how cool it was, and where they're inside of the briefcase and they're shooting, and then it'll cut away to like actual size and you see little laser beams shooting out of a suitcase, and it's kind of funny. I was kind of hoping we'd get stuff like that where I don't want the same joke necessarily, but build off of what you did in the first movie. And I don't feel like it necessarily did that. But this is all just kind of like we're looking at it in terms of like comedy and how it's building off of the first movie. I think it is actually just in terms of like what the director decided to do with the story in terms of like how he inserts his action beats, how he inserts his comedy beats. I think it's lesser than the first movie. But did you have anything else you wanted to say about that, or did you want to get more into the story stuff?
Well, you and I talked about Solo, a Star Wars movie, about a month ago, and you had said that it didn't really feel like it had a whole lot of style, and we talked a little bit about that. And I said then that I'm not really good at picking up on a director's style usually. And I named several directors that like have directed movies that I like, but I don't know the style of, and insert any director. And so like you said Peyton Reed is a competent director, and I say yeah, he is. And even if he's not as accomplished as like the Russo brothers or Tahiti. I'm sorry, how do you say his name? Takiti or
Taika Waititi.
I was combining his names. That's a problem. Even if he's not as an accomplished director as those guys, I'm okay with him being a competent director. It would probably take a director being really bad for me to notice and be like, okay, this is a problem. Like, this is not a good director. Like, it would take them being pretty bad at it for me to have an issue with it. So, like, I didn't have any issues with him, but like I said before, I'm just kind of like along for the ride, and as long as the story is good and the acting is good, I'm not going to have as much of a problem with anything else in a movie.
That's fair. I understand that. So I also got some, like, I don't know, I feel like I'm going to come off really negative in this discussion because I think this movie has a lot of problems and I have some frustrations with it. I don't hate this movie. Like, I'd give it a 6. Like, it's watchable. It's likable. I smiled. I laughed a little bit. I just think while I'm looking at it, I see potential for where this can go, and I don't think it really fulfills. And there are certain things in the story that just really make me rack my brain. Like, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me in terms of what they set up in the first movie. And I haven't seen the first movie in over 2 years, so I might be forgetting certain things. But there are specific rules that they established that I do remember. So it was successful enough at doing that. I guess I'll get into the big one. And that's funny because it deals with Scythe. Where, oh man, that was even a rude joke and I didn't even realize it. So, so you have the suit, right? Also, if you're playing a drinking game at home, anytime they say suit, take a shot. It's like Iron Man in that regard.
You'll give yourself liver damage just in that one scene where Michael Pena is saying, I like your suit. I wish I had a suit. Limited powers, even no power. Like he says suit like 5 times right there. So that you'll do some serious health damage there.
Well, you know what? I think the way we need to do it is like get into like a group. So it's like there's 4 or 5 of you, and anytime they say suit, like you almost like take turns. So you get on the line, the 5 of you. That's how you can avoid liver damage, I think. Yeah. So, but in terms of this movie, so the suit, you can shrink out of the suit, but if you do that, then you risk going crazy because of the PIM particles going to your head. Is that? I remember that's the way it was, right?
I feel like you're right. I haven't immediately watched the movie recently. I've seen it more recently than 2 years, but I think that's right.
And then that's why you need to wear the Ant-Man suit and wear the helmet because it stabilizes you. You won't go crazy. And the whole point of the bad guy is that he was experimenting with the PIM particles without a suit, and so he was going crazy, right? That was the whole thing.
Yeah, well, he was using PIM particles on other things. I don't know if he was going crazy, but he was, because he was kind of just, admittedly, I would say he was the weakest part of that movie. Not necessarily the acting, just the character. I don't know if he was going crazy. I think it was if you use the PIM particles on yourself, and I don't think he did that in the movie.
I think he was, though, because I remember that part where he comes to Michael Douglas's house,
Hmm.
and he's there and he's acting weird, and it's like, oh no, he's been experimenting with the Dim particles, and it's like, oh, he's going crazy. That's how I remember it playing out. And then you get to this movie, and they're just willy-nilly, just like inside of cars, going up, going down. Michael Penny's not even in a suit. When we get Paul Rudd out of house arrest, he's not in a suit. And it's just sort of this whole thing where I was like, did we just take the whole conflict from the first movie and throw it out the window? Because that's where I was kind of getting a little like, really? Like, you made a sequel because enough people liked the first movie and went out to see the first movie. And, like, if I really liked the first movie, I would have been disappointed by that. And so when there's also another part where Ant-Man gets really, really big and he's like on the side of a building, and then Agent Wu is trying to show up to arrest him. And then somehow Paul Rudd shrinks inside of the suit, manages to get out of the suit.
While the suit is still, like, inflated.
It's still big.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know how that works. Like, it's a funny comedy gag, but like I was watching, I was like, I don't get the rules of Ant-Man anymore. And so they're like expanding and contracting nilly, and then like you have the building where they shrink it, and then the person holding the building gets inside of a car, and then the car shrinks, and then the building goes from small size to even smaller size. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know I should just kind of turn my brain off and it's book science, who cares? But they did sort of establish science in the last movie, and I just assumed that stuff would carry over. So I was kind of getting a little confused.
And fair enough. I did not even think about any of that when I was watching this. Before you mentioned the Ant-Man suit being like 60 feet tall and then him walking out behind it. Before you mentioned that, I would have said a possible defense of that would have been that the car, because when we first see Janet, well, there's one scene between her and Hank, and then when we see her in the car with Scott and he wakes up, and then the big gag is, hey, they're like Hot Wheel car size. I guess you could maybe argue, and they don't mention this in the movie, so it's not canon, but you could argue that whatever technology that they have going on in the suit that keeps you from like going crazy when you shrink up and down, that maybe they've treated all those vehicles with that, so it's okay when they're in the vehicle, but that doesn't explain him shrinking down while outside of the suit. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't know. It didn't necessarily bother me because a lot of times movies like this, they start throwing out like completely fictional science stuff just at like rapid fire. Like, you've got a bunch of science people in this movie. Really, the only non-science people are Louise and Scott. And so, like, it didn't, I feel like when you're right, they're being inconsistent with the first movie, but it also didn't bother me because I don't care very much about the science. I'm more just there to see the cool punching.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like, this isn't like an issue that got me angry. I'm like, how dare they not stick to the fictional science of Ant-Man? But it was just sort of a thing that threw me for a loop.
Yeah, and once you mentioned it, I was thinking like, oh yeah, that is inconsistent, especially there at the end. Which honestly, like, that gag it's funny enough, but you didn't even have to do the gag. Like, it's not even in the top 10 gags of this movie, so like, they could have just not done that gag, and probably it would have been at least a little bit more consistent.
You know, a gag is really funny every time.
What?
The magic.
Yeah.
The card tricks.
Yeah.
Like,
I like
and
that.
like you have Agent Wu's like, wait, how did you do that? And then later Bobby Cannavale's like, wait, how did you do that? Like, all the guys are just like really interested in magic. I think that's funny.
I like that. The first time really cracked me up when he said, "How did you do it, Scott?" And like, I thought he was gonna say something serious, like about Captain America: Civil War. He's like, "What? The card trick? How'd you?" And like, I thought that was funny. That guy, I thought he delivered. I do wish that Agent Wu wasn't just a punchline throughout the whole movie, because I don't like. He's been in comics like in the last 15 years, but before that, he was mostly just like a background SHIELD guy from like 1960 whatever to 2000, and then he was actually created in the 50s. He was a Jack Kirby character. There's a incredibly racist character called the Yellow Claw, who's basically just a knockoff of...
Oh my God!
Have you heard of him?
Not until now,
What?
but I can tell what he's supposed to be.
Yeah, it's a knockoff of Fu Manchu, and he's equally racist. So like, it's all problematic. But then there was a series called well, actually, it was called the Yellow Claw, but Agent Wu was actually the protagonist of it, and Agent Wu himself is not a racist caricature. He's just a normal guy who happens to be Asian, and in the Yellow Claw, he is an incredibly racist stereotype. But fun little fact: there's these 2 books called The Golden Age of Marvel Comics that collect, a wide variety of stories from the Golden Age. A couple Captain America stories, a couple Human Torch stories, etc. And one of them has a Yellow Claw issue in it, and in that issue, Agent Wu actually has to shrink himself down and fight some communist spies, and they're all like, 1 inch tall. And so that's kind of a fun little connection. I highly doubt that anyone involved in this movie has read that comic, but I thought that was kind of fun, and that was my first introduction to Agent Wu. I feel like it would have been kind of cool if he could have been a little bit less of the butt of the joke. And maybe he will in a future movie, kind of like how Everett Ross was just there in Captain America Civil War and then was actually played a part in the Black Panther movie. So maybe they'll do that with Agent Wu. I think that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. The actor is Randall Park, and he's been showing up in like everything comedy over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I first saw him, I didn't know who he was, and it was going back I realized that. Do you ever watch The Office?
I know he was Asian Jim.
He was Asian Jim, yeah. And he was in a movie called Office Christmas Party, which was horribly not funny, but he was okay in it. And he just shows up, and it's like anytime there's like comedy with like, a who's who of like Jason Bateman and
Bill Hader.
I can't think of other Bill Hader, like other like comedy people that people like Kristen Wiig and Kate McKinnon, they all show up. Like he will just also be there. Like I guess he's friends with a lot of people in the comedy scene. And whenever he shows up, like he's really grown on me over the years. I didn't really know much about him, but he's made me laugh more and more every time he's shown up. And I'm like, hey, I like this Randall Park guy. It was kind of cool to see him.
I think he's in a TV show called Off the Boat, which is about an Asian family trying to make it in 1990s America, suburban America. I have never seen an episode, but I think he's the dad in that show.
Okay. So I guess kind of tangentially related to my size problem is oh boy, I can't. I wish there was another way to put that. But this is just kind of like a me issue where even when I was like a little kid, like usually like fictional science and stuff, I'd be like, oh, who cares? It's science. You know what I mean? It isn't actually real. Mm-hmm. But like whenever I'm driving on a long road trip and I'm just by myself or I'm like at work, every once in a while this will come into me. Now it started with teleportation, but I think it applies to shrinking and growing big, which is, so when you're teleporting, do you teleport and you're naked, or is it stuff touching your body that teleports too? Because if that's the case, and I'm wearing socks, do I teleport and my shoes aren't with me? And like I think about all that weird stuff where if I teleport, does my jacket travel with me or not? Mm-hmm. And then if I'm wearing a hat, does the hat teleport with me because it's touching my hair, or does that not really count as a part of me? My hair will teleport with me because it's on my body. You know what I mean? So like I think about all that weird, pointless stuff. Mm-hmm. Like I think about how Nightcrawler works, and I think about like if I had the power of teleportation, how would it work for me? And like I told this to my brother recently. I'm like, hey, this is long lost secret that you don't know about. I mean, he went, Connor, that sounds ridiculous. Why do you think about that? I'm like, I don't know, but it's this one thing, and it also kind of applies with Ant-Man's powers, size-altering powers, because it's like, so, and I was kind of touching on it when it came to the building where, so Luis is holding onto it, and it's already shrunken down, and then he gets inside the car, and the car shrinks. Mm-hmm. So is it the car that's shrinking? And so if they're in the car, is it like being inside of a suit? But they're inside of a suit, inside of a car. So how does that work? And so it's like, I'm thinking about all this when I should be enjoying the punching, but because I'm me and it's this one very specific situation, I am thinking about that. And because they want to do more stuff with the Ant-Man's powers stuff, because this is a sequel, I get why they want to do that. And they managed to make me not think about it in the first movie. So it is, I just think, one of the problems with trying to do something else. At least it's a problem for me anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's, not necessarily something that I don't have an issue with it, but I can understand how other people might. Like another one would be when we see the giant Ant-Man suit, leaning up against the building, and then we see Scott in his underwear. Like, there's no like he doesn't it's kind of like Star Trek. Another one that I've thought of is Star Trek. Like I don't know how much of that you've watched, but like you'll see 8 people on a planet, and then someone will say, "All right, 5 to beam," and then somehow whoever's up there pushing buttons knows which 5 of them to beam up. Stuff like that. Like here, all they do is they take a little disc thing and they throw it at something, and then it either shrinks it or grows it. And we see that they have like a blue disc and a red disc, and you throw which one you want for the desired effect. And then, so like if you just threw a disc at Scott and it shrinks him down, but like, how does it not blow up the suit, or shrink down the suit? And then it's like, it does affect his underwear and his socks, like you said. So like, it's something I didn't think about when watching the movie, but it's a very valid point.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of semantical science?
Well, you've got towards the end of the movie, Michelle Pfeiffer suddenly has magic powers, and I don't mind because most of this movie is based on very fictional science. Like at one point, Scott even says, "Do you guys just put the word quantum in front of everything?" And I think like, yeah, they do. Like that, you'll have any number of characters like Hope or Hank or Bill Foster. They will all just say something like, reverse the polarity is basically what it boils down to. And like they're acting like this stuff makes sense. And maybe somebody working on this movie actually did some research. Maybe there's somebody out there who likes dumb popular culture and also happens to be a genius in quantum physics, and they can watch this movie and make a bazillion views on YouTube talking about all the flaws with it and everything. But I don't know jack about quantum physics, so I don't know what here is real and what here is just bull science that they made up for this movie to be entertaining. But like, I can see how by the end of the movie, when she literally will just touch somebody and her hands start glowing, and then their only explanation was, well, I've been in a quantum realm for 30 years, so I had to evolve, like literal evolution. Like, I can see how that would upset some people. Like, up to a point, these movies have had internal consistency. Like you said, the first movie establishes rules. This movie just kind of does whatever it does. Like, oh, we feel bad for Ghost, so we want to cure her at the end, so she just has magic powers. And like, it's okay for me because a lot of it feels like fantasy, but I can see how this would be a huge issue for other people, and it's a little bit of an issue for me.
Yeah, it is. I think my issue isn't necessarily that she's got quantum powers now. She spent a long time in the quantum realm. We don't really know anything about it, so she got quantum powers. Cool, fine, cool with it. I guess my issue is that it's a quick fix at the end. It really is a Deus Ex Machina, where she shows up and like, I know that you have quantum problems. Let me Jesus touch you, or E.T. touch you, or whatever touch you on the head, and I will absolve you of your quantum sins, and you will be free to live without phasing through realities. I will say, like, I don't know. I have like next to nothing to say about Ghost. I think that she's kind of a non-character, but I really like the performance. I think that this actress does a pretty good job. I guess I have seen her in stuff before. I didn't know that, but she was in Ready Player One as Ben Mendelsohn's lackey. I didn't even know that was her, and I guess she was in Game of Thrones, which everyone has seen but me. So
yeah, I've never seen a full episode of Game of Thrones, but I was reading the trivia, and it was like, yet another Game of Thrones character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I was like, oh, okay. I've never seen her in anything, I don't think. I thought she was okay. This kind of reminds me of everybody's complaint about Spider-Man 3, where, it's okay for the Sandman to commit crimes because his daughter is sick, and, like, people complain about that, and it's like, yeah, but you didn't actually, give us a reason to care about the daughter other than she's a kid. Like, she doesn't have a personality, and the Sandman doesn't have much of a personality. So, like, yeah, it's understandable, like, if you have a kid and your kid is sick, like, what lengths will you go to save your kid? And, like, this whole movie, if there's a theme to it, it's family.
yes.
You've got Scott and his daughter, and then you've got Hope and Hank and, what's-her-face, Janet. So, like, there's a family theme going on there, and then Ghost, there's sort of a family theme. Really, there's more of a family theme between her and Bill Foster than there is between her and her dad, who's just in the flashback.
Yeah. I think that it's really specifically fathers and daughters is the linking theme here.
Good call.
And I do like that we have, like, Bill is her adopted father. So, and I like that they're kind of like fatherhood comes in many forms.
Yeah. And I like their relationship. But the thing I had a little bit of an issue with was at one point she says, Scott has a daughter. I'll just go, like, and she doesn't even say what she's going to do. So, like, and he says, no, don't do that. Like, there's certain lines we can't cross. Like, I was okay with us kidnapping Scott and possibly murdering Janet, but I won't let you kill a kid or whatever, because like she didn't even say. And then like she has this look on her face like she's confused why he won't let her kidnap and or murder an innocent child. Like she looks confused, and I thought that was a little weird. And maybe it's just that they've kind of like, because she's phasing, so at times it's a little hard to read her reactions and her expressions. But I feel like this kind of reminds me of the Sandman in Spider-Man 3, where it's like, oh, she's dying, so it's okay. We're supposed to feel bad for her. But like beyond that, like you said, she's just there. She doesn't have much of a character. I do wish we could have gotten to know her a little bit more. I do like that, it's because of a quick and easy fix. But I do like that this is probably one of the only movies where they don't kill off the villain at the end. Most of the villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe get killed off by the end, and I like that we now have one and she's not necessarily a villain anymore, because once she's cured, she has no reason to be bad. But I like that they don't just kill her off in, like she explodes or whatever because she didn't get the cure. I like that she's still around.
Yeah. I like the ghosting effect. I complained with Black Panther and Thor Ragnarok that I don't feel like they had enough time to properly do a lot of the CG in those movies. Mm-hmm. I feel like the special effects here are really, really good. I think that probably comes from it's a much smaller scale. There's a lot more practical stuff and less CG that you do. Of course, there's still a lot of CG, but it's less than, say, Black Panther or Thor Ragnarok. Mm-hmm. And I think that probably Peyton Reed had more time. I remember pretty quickly after the first movie, this movie was announced. So
3 months.
Yeah, that's right. It was like really late 2015. So it's like he had the better part of 3 years to do this. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the ghosting effect is really kind of neat. I like that. And I think that, like, she says that it feels like all of, like, the cells in her body are being ripped apart and, like, sewn back together, like, all the time. Mm-hmm. And she kind of has, like, this sort of twitchy thing going on, but it's not, like, comically over the top. Like, oh, I'm so twitchy and damaged and stuff. But she also kind of has, like, she sounds like she's about to, like, shout at you at any moment. I like that. I don't know. It was an interesting enough performance. I wouldn't say it's, like, Killmonger from Black Panther or anything, but I liked it.
Yeah, in terms of villains, this is a step down, I will say. We've talked before about, like, the last few movies they've really upped their game on villains. Like, I think that Vulture, Ego, Killmonger, I would even include Ultron and Baron Zemo, or I guess just
Thanos.
Zemo, yeah, and Thanos. They've all been really good villains, really compelling and really interesting. This is not the case in this movie. I enjoy this movie, but I don't think she's a very compelling villain.
Yeah, and even, like, I think the last film that we had that was not very fleshed out on the page was Hela, but I mean, I think that Cate Blanchett did a really good job of making that character entertaining.
Yeah, and it was all her. It wasn't the script.
Yes.
It was her just making it funny, or not necessarily funny, but yeah, entertaining, like you said.
She felt like a guest star on 60s Batman.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I would describe her. She's like, I remember her, and I think that's cool because Cate Blanchett's a cool lady.
Yeah. What did you think of I guess it's a twist, because I didn't see it coming, the twist that Bill Foster was helping Ava, or Ghost?
I mean, I didn't see it coming, but we had, like, a scene to prepare for it, right? Like, the first scene, we have that scene where they're talking with him. I like that part. It's kind of fun. And then it's like we get one scene of something else, and then the very next scene, it's, I'm working with her. I'm like, oh, that was, like, I guess we found that out pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. I like it. It's fine. It kind of ties into that whole theme of, like, fatherhood and all the different forms and whatnot. Yeah. I guess my issue with it is not necessarily a problem with the reveal, but it's kind of more of a broad thing where it's like we have, this kind of motif of fatherhood, but they don't really do anything with it. Like, what are you saying about fathers and daughters? Mm-hmm. I guess nothing. It's just kind of like a unifying character thing, I suppose.
Yeah. And I'm not usually much about theme. I'm more about plot and acting and writing. But, like, if I can notice, I guess I'll commend them for at least attempting a theme. But like you said, they don't go very far with it. That seems like something they vaguely hinted at it in the first draft, and then they did a couple more drafts of the script, but they didn't really touch on the theme anymore in redraft of the script.
Maybe they just wanted it to be like a motif, like all these characters have this thing in common. They didn't want to, like, beat you over the head with it. But it's hard not to notice it. Like, there's 3 sets of fathers and daughters. kind of 4 if you count Bobby Cannavale as the stepfather. And so, but it's so much, like as a viewer, you're like, okay, I'm really noticing. So what are we doing with it? And maybe they didn't want to do anything with it. They just wanted to show you it.
Yeah, that's possible.
I don't know. I'm just spitballing.
So, I do think it's a little odd that like Bill Foster seems okay with going ahead with this thing like to save Ava, and like Michael Douglas even says like you're going to kill Janet if you do that, and he says we don't know that, and I'm thinking yeah, but you don't know for sure that it won't. Like you've already got Hank here, you've done your needlessly complicated hey I'm working with Ghost. Why don't we all just agree to work together? All 5 of us like. We got Scott here. We can pull the information from his mind. We can simultaneously save Ava and save Janet. She's been in there for 30 years. Like, there's no timetable at that point. And I thought that was weird that they drug him and kidnapped Scott. And it's like, we're going to go save my mom. Okay, but couldn't you have waited 3 days until he gets off house arrest? Like, did you really have to kidnap him now? And, like, later in the movie, once they... she basically she more or less magically takes over Scott's body temporarily. And so she's talking through Scott, and she says something about the quantum is going to align, and then you have 2 hours to rescue me, and then after that it won't be ready for another century. But Hank and Hope don't know that. They don't know that there's a timetable at that point. They just kidnap Scott because he possibly has information on Janet, and they've been trying to rescue Janet in between movies. But like, couldn't they at that point all they had to do is wait 3 days, and then so many of the plot problems in this movie or the obstacles that they face would have been resolved if they just waited until he was off house arrest, right?
Yeah, no, you are. They could have done that. I'm kind of happy they didn't. Like, that's like conflict for the sake of conflict in a way that serves like the story in a dramatic way that I'm okay with. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, oh, hey, I had a dream about this, and it's like, oh, well, let's kidnap you. It also adds some funny comedy beats of like, hey, let's have a giant ant recreate his daily routine. That was kind of funny. And then you also have like, I need to get back to my house. You know, there was something there. I'm okay with it, even if it is contrived. But in terms of the camp of conflict for the sake of conflict, I did, think about it multiple times throughout the movie of why are they not just like teaming up and like having an alliance? Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe a little later they'll be like, this uneasy alliance breaking, but like for the time being, you'd think they'd want to help each other out, but I guess not. Yeah. That did feel like conflict for the sake of conflict in a way that just kind of complicated things in an unnecessary way.
Mm-hmm. Especially since Bill Foster seems to have known Janet. Like he worked with Hank, and I guess he knew Janet because he's baiting him earlier in the movie and says that Janet paid the price for sticking with Hank. So he knew Janet, and he seems okay with sacrificing her to save Ava. And it just seems like for a scientist to just be like, well, maybe this will happen, maybe it won't. Like, I get it. Science is all about like trial and error, but like when two human beings' lives are on the line, maybe you should be a little more careful. Like, let's work this out a little bit and not have as much on the line. And again, like Ava's life is going to end in, 3 weeks maybe. He says, just a few weeks, she may die. So like, I'm okay with him, we have to do this, and we have to be fast about it, and especially her. But at the same time, like, all of them working together, it would have gotten done even faster than it did in the movie. But yeah, it'd be a very boring movie if they did that. So kind of like the, people who talk about in the Lord of the Rings, why didn't they use the eagles to fly the whole way? Well, they could have, but it would have been a very boring movie. So like, same thing here, I guess.
Yeah. I guess very quickly I'll tack on. Like I talked about how they just kind of try to find stuff for characters to do from the first movie, but we also need to add a bunch of characters. Like I was kind of counting it up like last night. There are 6 returning supporting characters from the first movie. Mm-hmm. You have his daughter. Makes sense why you'd bring her back, right? She is like the emotional center for a main character. You have Judy Greer as his ex-wife and Bobby Cannavale as her husband. Okay, I guess, he has a daughter with Judy Greer, so it makes sense to have them too. But then you also have Luis, and you also have the 2 other guys, T.I. and the guy from Twin Peaks Season 3. And then you have, I think that's it. I think so. But then in terms of this movie, you have Walton Goggins and the FBI agent who's revealed to be a traitor. And you have Walton Goggins. Did I already say Walton Goggins?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, darn it. But then you have like Ghost and Goliath and and Janet comes on into the fray, and so it's like outside of just Ant-Man, outside of Scott Lang, Hank Pym, and Hope Van Dyne, you have like 6 new characters and 6 supporting characters, and it just kind of becomes, I think, a little like clustered. And I think that I don't think it gracefully goes from one subplot to the next. Like you have the whole thing where it's like Scott's old buddies are trying to put together a business, and he's a part of that business, I guess. Well, but he's on house arrest, so he's not a part of the business yet. So it is just sort of like I find that an unnecessary subplot. Like I don't get why we needed to bring that in.
I think it would have been fine if we find out that Louise and the other 2 guys have started a business, but it's kind of like, let's just add as many plot wrinkles as we can. Like we have to have this subplot of them with their first client, and if this client doesn't work out, then they're going to go bankrupt. Like we have to have that because we have to have Louise reveal to Walton Goggins and Ghost where they are under the truth serum, and then that kind of leads to everything in the 3rd act. Like if we don't have that, then there would be no reason for Hank, Janet, and Scott to fail at that point. Like they would have brought Janet. I keep calling her Janet. It's Hope, Hank, and Scott. They would have brought Janet into the movie like before the 3rd act even began. So like I feel like that's why they do that. But I think that it does make the movie a little too busy with them doing that.
Yeah, and I think they do a well enough job of trying to incorporate all of the subplots. It's not like it falls on its face, but I do think it is a little busy. That's a good way of putting it.
Mm-hmm. And like at one point, Scott says, "Well, I told Louise where we were," and like I get why he did it, because they've got this business and he needs to help him with this thing. 2 things were running through my mind. Number 1, why does Louise need Scott to do this thing? Because he says like, "Oh, the client specifically asked for security cameras in the back of the building. We don't have any there. So I'm going to bring this to you, Scott. You're the only person who can fix this." Why? Why can't Louise just add security cameras in the back? Like, that seems like, I don't know anything about security cameras, but that seems like something Louise could have done. That doesn't seem like something...
From what I remember about the first movie, Scott Lang says that he has a master's in electrical engineering, so I guess that might have something to do with it. That's for a gag in the first movie, so you might have forgotten about it, where he's like, "I have a master's in electrical engineering. I'll find work." Hard cut to him. "Hi, welcome to Baskin Robbins."
Right.
And it's like, ah, ha, ha, that's funny.
Yeah, and speaking of them reusing jokes or not reusing jokes, I'm glad they didn't try and do the Baskin Robbins knows everything. Like that's something Deadpool 2 would have done. They would have reused the Baskin Robbins joke again. I'm gonna keep kicking that movie until I feel like my foot hurts. So anyway, but yeah, like.
Well, I mean, you're not wrong. They did reuse a lot of jokes. I just found it to be funnier the second time around. So
fair enough.
It's fine. Like I don't like Deadpool as a character, but I like that second movie pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a bit of catharsis I feel whenever I hear someone kicking Deadpool the movies across the floor. I don't know why. It's mean and it's maybe a little morbid and dark, but I like the movie, but I find a little bit of joy in people hating it for some reason.
But like I feel like even with Scott being a master's in electrical engineering, I feel like I don't know what Michael Pena's character, like what Louise, what he does, what his expertise level is, but he had to have done something to have gotten in jail, and like he's helping Scott with the heist whenever he breaks into Hank's house in the first movie. So I feel like he could have just taken care of the security camera thing. Like it's one of those things where like you can throw in as much like bull science as you want to kind of confuse audiences who are not science smart, but like security cameras, what's so hard about that? Like I don't know. I feel like if they had been a little bit more vague about what it was he needed Scott to do, then I would have bought it more.
Okay. That makes sense.
And then also,
it is just a wrinkle to try to get us the plot moving.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, and then also I was thinking like when he tells them like, "Oh, I told Louise where we were," and they're both thinking exactly what I'm thinking. Like, what? Are you kidding me? Like the one person you should not have told where we are, and you told him. Like, and I know why he did it, but still, it's like it sounds pretty flimsy when he's explaining it to them. And again, like
yeah, but I get why he does it though, because it's like he only thinks this is gonna go on for like at most like the day, and he won't be back. And he's like, I still like, hey, I want to be able to have a job and like make money, and I want to prove my value before I have the job. And I don't know, I do kind of like the whole idea of like a small business that they're trying to start up, because it is sort of like the whole like we're ex-convicts. It's very difficult for us to find work, so we're gonna make our own, and it's kind of like the entrepreneurial thing. And I like that. It's a nice little detail that I wish maybe wasn't either give it a bigger, more significant role or downsize it a little bit. It does kind of make it a little busy though.
One thing I'm of two minds about is, so I hate it in sequels
or you have a movie that's the first of its franchise, and then you have a romantic subplot where these two characters get together by the end of the movie. Let's say, for conversation's sake, we're talking about Ghostbusters 1, National Treasure 1, and Ant-Man 1. Okay, and then in the sequel, your characters who you spent the entire movie waiting to see if they will get together, less so with Ghostbusters 1, but they do get together. And then in the sequel, it's like, oh, they're not together. We're going to have to watch them get back together all over again. And like they do that in National Treasure 2, where it's like you spent the whole movie rooting for them, maybe, and then they get together, and then the second movie, just kidding, they're not together. And like they do that in Ghostbusters 2, and they do it here. And I'm kind of two minds about it, because on the one hand, they don't spend a whole lot of time with the romantic subplot here, and they didn't really in the first one either, I guess, because in the first movie, when they're kissing, it kind of comes out of nowhere, but
yeah, it does.
But like here, I don't know, like it seems like we're kind of hitting the reset button on their relationship, and it seems like we could have just not had them kissing in the first movie, and then in this one, maybe she could, like when she says we were training together, we were working together, we were doing some other stuff together, or she said something funny, like the way she said it. And maybe that could have been a line like, oh, they were almost in a relationship, and then he blew it to go work with Captain America. And so, like, I like the idea that his actions in Civil War had consequences for other people. I like that her and Hank are on the lam now, because in the first movie, it was only ever Scott who was on the lam. Like, he was the one doing stuff and getting in trouble, and then, like, he was almost arrested a few times. So, like, I like that now it involves other people who are also having to do it, and this potentially could have been, like, out of their comfort zone for them. Like, you know, Scott is used to being a criminal and kind of living the criminal life, but these two are not. But we've skipped 2 years, so we don't really get to see them getting used to that aspect of their life. But I like the idea of these two also kind of living in Scott's world now, but at the same time, I don't like that this resets the relationship, and we're basically right at the same point we were at the end of the first movie in terms of Hope and Scott.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a really good point. I was feeling that too, but I think you articulated it better than I could have. Speaking of weird sequel things, this does a trick that I thought we were kind of past, and that is the weird retcons of events from the end of the last movie. Okay, so let me follow. Tell me if this train of thought is accurate, okay? Scott Lang goes to the quantum realm. Janet sees him, I guess knows who he is, and instead of saying hi, she like phases through him and puts an antenna in his head, because I guess she knows that he's going to be going back to the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, why doesn't she walk up and say, hey, I don't know who you are, but if you have a way of getting out of here, what is your way? Oh, I'm going to stick myself with this disc to get back to full size. And then she could have been like, do you have 2 of those discs? And then, you know what I mean? It's like, it just seems like it complicates that first movie in a weird way just so this movie can have a premise. And then it's kind of disappointing in this movie because when she finally shows up, she already knows who everyone is. And it's just like, hey, I made it. And everyone's like, hey, you're back. Anyways, we have the rest of the climax to do. And it's sort of like, there's not a whole lot of drama to it. It's not like a payoff. It's like she already knows who they are. They don't seem that happy to be with her because it's like there's a big climax that they have to be involved in, and I get that, but at the same time, like, it's kind of spreading things a little too thin, all right? It's spreading the drama a little too thin, it's spreading her payoff a little too thin, it's spreading the action a little too thin, like, it's kind of all these disparate elements I don't feel like get their moment to shine towards the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't make sense when you start to think about it, and I guess, like, she sees a guy wearing her husband's suit, and so if it was me, I would think, hey, that's my husband, because, like, most of his face is covered up. She can't tell that it's not Michael Douglas just from, you know, looking at him, you know, and seeing an Ant-Man costume. You think, like, that's my husband. And so I'm wondering if there was an actual conversation between her and Scott, and he just doesn't remember it because she has magic powers and she wiped his mind for some reason. Maybe not, I don't know, because she would have no reason to wipe his mind. But I guess I'm wondering if they didn't actually know what the premise of this movie was going to be when they were working on the first movie. Because like you said, the first movie went through a lot of production hell. Like they were, you know, Edgar Wright was tentatively working on the movie all the way back, like when Iron Man 1 had first come out. Like, you know, 2008, 2009, he was at least kind of working on Ant-Man at that point. So like maybe they were still kind of ironing everything out when Peyton Reed was finishing up Ant-Man 1, and then maybe they just didn't know the premise of this movie, and so then after they make the movie, and then like 3 months after it comes out, then it's like, hey guys, we're gonna do Ant-Man and the Wasp. So by that point, like they must have just quickly said like, hey, Peyton Reed and whatever screenwriters are working on this movie, what do you want to do for Ant-Man sequel? And he says, let's get the original Wasp and bring her out of the quantum realm. Okay, how? I don't know. Well,
Yeah,
Scott was there,
yeah.
so they have to retcon it, and in a way, it's weird that like he's had this telepathic signal in his head for 2 years and hasn't known about it this whole time. And they mention offhand that like them attempting to open the quantum realm is what activated that signal. But I feel like that's something that should have been more. I don't know. Like I feel like that's something that should have been activated before the 2 year mark. Like, for all she knows, they're never coming back for her because she's planted that, and then 2 years have passed since that. And I guess time maybe works differently in the quantum realm. I'm not really sure. Didn't they mention that at one point? Because she says don't go through a time portal. If you see a time portal, don't.
That's what I hear. Yeah, but it's kind of weird because then it's like they get inside of like the Fantastic Voyage submarine, and they're like, all right, let's go back to it, and then she goes, it's been 30 years. I'm like, okay, I guess she knows. Like,
Yeah.
so. But then again, I don't know if that's been like it hasn't felt like, it's felt like 100 years, or it's felt like 10 years, or whatever. But I don't know, because I guess she just knows what's been going on in the real world via Scott Lang, I suppose. I don't know. It's a big question mark. It's kind of inconsistent. So I don't know. But I do have issues with what they do with Janet, in terms of like how she is as like a payoff, and like she just kind of shows up, and it's all very convenient what she knows and what she can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she's not much of a character, unfortunately. Whenever I first saw the trailer for the movie, and I didn't even know what Walton Goggins was going to be in this movie. He ends up being kind of he's an antagonist, but he's not necessarily a villain. He's kind of just a secondary villain who's there to complicate things, but he's not your serious villain. You don't take him seriously as a villain, right? So Ghost is your main villain. I honestly thought that Janet was going to be a villain in this movie. When I first heard the movie was going to be Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then I saw a trailer, and you see Hope, like, almost being crushed by a hammer, and, like, knives are going through the air, and then we see a Pez dispenser being blown up. I thought that Hope was, like, I thought somehow maybe Janet was going to come out of the quantum realm, and, like, her mind was going to be messed up, and she was going to be a villain. And I guess I'm glad they didn't do that. But at the same time, like, she only shows up, like, when 20 minutes of the movie are left, and then she's really only there to kind of fix the plot. We don't know a lot about her. So if they happen to do an Ant-Man 3, or if she shows up in Infinity War Part 2, I think it would be cool if we can actually get some characterization for her.
I agree. It's also kind of a bummer because it's like, we got Michelle Pfeiffer and she didn't really have anything to do. That's a bummer.
And like a few days ago, and I didn't read the article, but I saw an article that said like Michelle Pfeiffer almost walked away from Ant-Man 2, and I didn't want to read it because I hadn't seen the movie yet. But now I'm kind of interested in seeing like why did she want to walk away, or was that just a clickbait article? So I don't know. So what did you think of the post-credits scene?
So I was walking into it, I'm like, okay, I figure this is going to be taking place around the same time as Infinity War, but it ultimately won't matter. I guess I was right, but I was thinking like, okay, either the bad guy's going to like just about stab Ant-Man, and then he's going to like turn into dust, and it's going to be this really like, oh, well, ain't that convenient? Luck. Or it's going to be a post-credit scene where some of our main characters are going to turn to dust. And that's just what they did. Right. Except with the twist, he's stuck in the quantum realm. Ooh.
Yeah, see, so. I, like, right after Infinity War, me and a friend were talking about this, and I told him, I said, I am 100% certain that they are going to do a post-credit scene where we see the snap involving characters from this movie. And they do that. What I did not see coming was that he would be stranded in the quantum realm. And I have this weird theory that's probably never going to be confirmed or denied, but I feel like if Scott was not in the quantum realm, that maybe he would have disappeared and then someone else would have stayed. Like, him being in the quantum realm, he was immune from the snap, and so someone else disappeared in his place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got the same feeling from that, where it's like he's not in our reality right now.
Mm-hmm. So I think
although you would think, though, since Janet spent how many years in the quantum realm and was evolved by it, that she might be immune too, but whatever. That's also true. The shot where it's like the camera's moving and then it tilts through the falling ash towards the towards the
phone
little
thing.
walkie-talkie.
Yeah.
That's the best shot in the entire movie, and I'm 100% sure that Peyton Reed had nothing to do with this post-credits.
I guess it could have been maybe the Russo brothers, since they were all
Maybe.
because they've done that before, where like in a post-credit scene of Thor: The Dark World, I'm pretty sure James Gunn directed that scene, the one that had the Infinity Stone being taken to the Collector. So
Yeah, okay. I got something to say about that post-credit scene. Okay.
yeah.
So that was attached to Thor: The Dark World, which is not a good movie, and it's most people's least favorite Marvel Studios movie.
Mm-hmm.
I remember after that movie came out and was not getting well received, and people were like, what was up with that weird post-credit scene with Benicio del Toro? It was just kind of weird. The cinematographer for the movie came out and was like, I just want everyone to know, I had nothing to do with that post-credit scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he thought that was lame and embarrassing, and he just wanted to make sure everyone knew he had nothing to do with Guardians of the Galaxy. Cut to less than a year later, Guardians of the Galaxy comes out and everyone loves it. I think that's hilarious.
I didn't know it was the cinematographer. I thought it was actually is it Alan Taylor?
Alan Taylor. Yeah.
I thought it was Alan Taylor himself who said he was happy to have nothing to do with that scene or something, and I thought, like, man, even if Guardians sucks, that's a douchey thing to say. Like,
it is. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, and so they've done that before, where it's like I want to say they've done it with the X-Men movies, where like the post-credit scene for the Wolverine is done by someone who didn't direct the Wolverine, but I could be wrong about that. Yeah, so I was 100% sure that the post-credit scene here would involve the snap. I just didn't know they were going to strand Scott. So it's going to be weird now because like everyone kind of made a big scene, not a big scene, but everyone was like noticing and was impressed by the fact that at the end of Infinity War, basically you're left with the original Avengers from the first Avengers movie. You've got Tony off on space with Nebula, and then you've got like all the other original characters from the first Avengers team. They're still around, and then everyone else pretty much has disappeared. And so now it's going to be like, okay, the original Avengers and Scott. Like, that's going to be, I don't know, it's going to kind of rub me the wrong way, not in a bad way, just like Scott isn't an original Avenger in this movie universe, so like he shouldn't be the one, you know what I'm saying? Like, unless he shows up late in Avengers 4 to help them after they've already, you know, I don't know.
What if he just is stuck in the quantum realm, and then Ant-Man 3 is they all have to go into the quantum realm again and rescue Scott?
And this time Ghost is just like, I don't need to be cured. I just don't want you guys rescuing Scott.
Yeah, there you go.
Or here's a thought. So spoilers for Avengers 4, maybe. So apparently there's been a leaked picture of Tony and Scott talking to Steve circa the first Avengers movie. Like, it's Steve wearing the Captain America costume he had during the invasion of New York, and he doesn't have a beard. And then it's Tony older, and it's Scott talking to him. And some people think it's going to be time travel. Some people think that it's going to be Tony using the AARP technology or whatever it's called. That's retirement. I don't know what the technology is.
I was just gonna say, is that an old person joke?
Yeah.
Because if that is, I applaud you. That's a clever joke.
It was like ARF or something like that, or BARF, or I don't remember. But it was the thing he used in Civil War when he was like, you know, it's really expensive therapy, and he was watching his younger self say goodbye to his parents. Some people think it's going to be that. Some people think it's going to involve time travel. What if Scott ends up going through a time portal? I don't know how Tony would be there, but like, she specifically said, if you see a time portal, don't go through it because we won't be able to rescue you. It'd be weird, but what if he goes through a time portal and ends up in 2012 to say like, hey guys, Thanos is gonna snap, or I mean, he wouldn't even know what Thanos is, so maybe he wouldn't. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe that's a possibility. So it's a thing, and maybe he gets rescued like in the first 10 minutes of Avengers 4.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
Do you have anything else to say about the movie?
Yeah, I guess I like the second post-credit scene more than a lot of people. People are like, oh, it's just an ant playing drums, whatever. I actually think it's kind of creepy where it's like you see that the signal broadcast has all gone off and you just hear that electrical hum.
Yeah.
And then it's like when it fades away and it says Ant-Man and the Wasp will return.
And then a question mark.
Question mark. And I'm like, ooh. And you still hear the hum from the TV playing over that. Like, it's kind of eerie, and that's kind of our first real glimpse of like post the snapping Marvel universe.
If M. Night Shyamalan ever made an MCU movie, I would you have to make it be called The Snappening. Like, please, Marvel, if you happen to get M. Night Shyamalan, just make it be called The Snappening. I think that would be great. And just like
That's all I have.
It's just 2 hours of like people turning to dust, and like that's it. But
it is the first time a Windows desktop screensaver has been a Marvel Universe film. Just 2 hours of people fading away.
Yeah.
And that'll be my desktop. There you go.
So I didn't love the second credit scene. I've come to expect the second scene in these movies to be kind of pointless. It's kind of like the first Avengers movie really started it, where it's like you get a really awesome scene if you know who Thanos is, and if you don't, then it's like, what's Purple Hulk doing out there in outer space?
No joke. I was like, wait, is that Abin Sur from DC? What? I had no idea who Thanos was in 2012.
Right, and I mean, like, you wouldn't have any reason to know who he is because they don't tell you in that movie. That's part of the reason I don't like these post-credit scenes, because like if you watch Iron Man 2, you might know who Thor is if you've heard about mythology, and like if you watch it now, you'll know who Thor is because he's had 3 movies. But like if you watch Iron Man 2 in 2010 or 2011, then you're not going to know what this hammer signifies that Phil Coulson sees. So like that's kind of, it's niche, and it's only like something that a very few people are going to actually like, like people who know comic books and people who are going to like research these characters before watching the movie. But anyway, I mean, that's just how it is now. But like with, I was going somewhere. Oh yeah, since Avengers 1, you get 2 credit scenes. You get a serious one, an actual one, and then you get a goofy one. And I don't even remember what the scenes were in Iron Man 3, but like you had the one where Tony is talking to Bruce Banner, and it's like, haha, he was talking to Bruce Banner. Was there a second one in Iron Man 3?
No, that one was it. Yeah, that was
okay, so that one really made me mad because that was just kind of dumb, and then like I really had to use the restroom. And that's my thing always. Like I would never go to the theater if it wasn't for internet and spoilers, but I go to the theater so that I don't get spoiled, and then I'm sitting there for like 10 minutes waiting for a scene so that I can go use the bathroom, and most of the time it's a dumb scene that really is just like a joke. And like in this case, that's what it was. I was expecting to find out who Walton Goggins' client was. I don't know why, but because he keeps saying like he made some promises to some very dangerous people, and he says like he's he's got a buyer or something like that.
That's his client. Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about his FBI person.
Right.
Like, they revealed that.
Well, yeah, and I was thinking like, well, maybe it's going to be Hydra again. And I was thinking like, Hydra was kind of involved in the first Ant-Man movie, so like maybe we're going to see that there's still some Hydra people out there, and Walton Goggins almost gave them Pym's lab or something like that. And so like I kind of thought we were going to get another Hydra thing, but I guess after you've literally dissolved half of the universe in Avengers Infinity War, going back to Hydra maybe is going to be a step backwards. So I don't know if we're going to see Hydra again in the MCU, but I was thinking maybe he was involved with Hydra, and maybe that was why who he was trying to sell it to. So I was kind of hoping we were going to see a little bit of a payoff to that. So that was kind of why I was disappointed with that scene.
I get that.
But yeah, I feel like anyone who's like, are you kidding me? That scene was stupid. I feel like they need to watch like literally any post-credit scene and be like, oh, okay, that's a pattern. It's been happening for a while. Like, Thor: The Dark World had a serious scene with them giving the Infinity Stone to Benicio del Toro, and then he had a goofy or like a stupid scene of Thor running of the monster. There was a monster that escaped on Earth and was just
You have the scene where okay. So the first one was the collector scene, and then it was basically a Harlequin romance cover where he comes down from the sky and she makes out with him, and then it just cuts to giant ice monster running around.
Yeah. And like, that's to be expected at this point. I will say, speaking of the ant playing the drums, one scene that I laughed out loud a few times, and I was like the only person who laughed out loud at these jokes. Like, there was 2 jokes I laughed out loud, and not a single person in the theater laughed. One of them was when Hank said if they knew it was you, they would be at your house already. And then he looks down at his phone and he sees the ant playing the drums, and he says, "What are you, 15?" Like talking to Scott. I laughed very hard at that. I don't know why. Just his delivery of that I thought was really funny. And nobody else laughed. And then again, when Ant-Man is trying to get an ant to come down and give him a ride, and the birds keep coming and eating the flying ants, and then he screams, "You murderers!" I thought that was really funny too. So like, I don't know. I don't know if because there was a lot of older people in the theater with me, and I'm not saying like old people can't enjoy these movies, but I generally expect it to be like people in their 40s and younger watching these movies. But there was like a lot of like people past their 50s watching this in the theater with me, and I was a little.
What kind of like theater was it? What company was it? A Regal or a Cinemark or what?
AMC.
See, that's the thing. We don't have AMCs in Oregon. I can speak from working at a theater for 2.5 years. Mondays are senior days.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe that's the case.
Yeah, and also me, because that's the one day I don't work. So I like.
And you are an old man at heart, as you told me.
That's true.
Times.
Yes, I am. In fact, on the way to the theater, I yelled at a kid to get off my lawn. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. So you said you would put this at like a 5 or a 6. I would say it's as good as Ant-Man 1, and I'm not good at numbering, especially with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where we now have 20 movies in this continuity. It's really hard for me to like rank them, because you get like 3 or 4 movies a year. So like it's hard for me to continuously adopt or change my ranking. But I don't do the number rankings, but I think it's as good as Ant-Man 1. I enjoyed it quite a bit. There are some problems. I don't think any of these problems are necessarily deal breakers for me. There's a few things that I was disappointed with, but overall, I thought it was really fun, and I will definitely be watching it again.
All right. Yeah, and I don't think I will. It won't hurt to watch it again, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. So you hadn't seen Ant-Man 1 since theaters?
I saw it in 2016 leading up to Civil War.
Oh, okay. Which is probably a good idea. So did you know Ant-Man was going to be in Civil War?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Oh, okay. See, like, Ant-Man and Civil War both came out in that period where I was, like, really just despised the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So at some point, I was like, okay, I'm going to go back and rewatch all the movies I haven't seen. And so those were, like, I had at first checked it out from the library when I was really sick. And then later, it was donated to my work, and I bought it for $1. And, I mean, I don't think you can beat that for $1. Is that in RoboCop
No, I'd buy that for $1.
Yeah, I bought it for $1. And so, like, and then I want to say Doctor Strange was the first one I watched in theaters since, like, Guardians of the Galaxy. And then, like, I had also skipped whatever was in between Thor: The Dark World and Guardians of the Galaxy. So, like, there was quite a bit I had skipped, I guess.
So you skipped Winter Soldier in theaters.
Yeah, and Civil War. Everyone was telling me that Winter Soldier was, like, the best movie they had seen, but I kept telling them, I'm sorry, but after Thor: The Dark World, they had their, like, they really blew it. Like, you can't bring me back after that, and it was pretty bad. But then I rewatched it again last year or the year before, and I liked it more the second time. So I won't say it's a good movie, but I liked it a little bit more.
And that's interesting because, like, I actually quite enjoyed that movie when I first watched it in the theater, and every time I watch it, I like it less and less. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we're on opposite paths with our love/dislike of Thor 2.
Yeah. At one time, I was calling it Thor Into Darkness, and I was calling Star Trek The Dark World.
That's good.
Which Star Trek Into Darkness really is garbage, and I will never rewatch that one. So I guess that's all we have to say. We sometimes will talk about, like, what do you think is going to happen in the future of the Ant-Man franchise. Honestly, I can't say, because so far all they've done is take Iron Man villains that are never going to show up in an Iron Man movie and then use them as Ant-Man villains. Ghost is an Iron Man villain. Darren Cross is an Iron Man villain. And then Sonny Birch is an Iron Man character.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
The only character in these movies who is, and like after the Ant-Man movie, they turned Darren Cross into Yellow Jacket in the comics, so they kind of changed him in the comics to be more of an Ant-Man character. But,
nah, that doesn't count. Yeah,
right.
That's cheating.
But out of all these characters, as far as I can tell, the only one who was an actual Ant-Man villain was, in this movie, Ghost's father. In the comics, he is Egghead, who I don't know anything about Egghead other than he's an evil scientist and he's bald. And this movie kind of, Hank mentions that he was a traitor. That's really all he says. We don't know what that means. So he's an Ant-Man villain, but I'm assuming if they do an Ant-Man 3 that it's going to involve some Iron Man villain being turned into an Ant-Man villain.
Well, yeah, I would guess so too, if I knew that history. I guess it's weird that we've been talking for well over an hour at this point, and we have not brought up Walton Goggins because there's not really much to talk about, which I think is kind of sad because I really like Walton Goggins, especially after seeing The Hateful Eight, and he's got basically nothing to do. He has like a few monologues that he gets to go on, which is, I like watching Walton Goggins act, but I wish he was more interesting.
Yeah, I had actually forgotten that he was in The Hateful Eight. My parents they really like the TV show Justified, and
Hmm.
and I've seen bits and pieces of it. He's in that show, and he kind of does the same thing here that he does there, where it's like he's a thug, and here he's a little bit more cultured than he is in Justified. But in Justified, he's like you wouldn't expect him to be, but he's very cultured for being in the position he's in, where you expect him to just be like an idiot, but he's actually like almost suave. And he kind of does that here also, except he's he's maybe the head of a criminal organization. He's got like four guys working for him, so we don't really know how much of a criminal organization he has, but he's basically just there to kind of be a plot wrinkle. And that's sad because like he is an entertaining actor, and it's kind of like Kate Blanchett in Hella. Like he brings a lot to the table that wasn't there on the page.
Okay. Okay.
That's what I thought. Like, I was really entertained when he was saying, like, don't shoot the chandelier. That's a priceless chandelier. Like, I have a feeling that's something that he ad-libbed and it wasn't in the script. But I feel like any entertainment value that's with the character is all from the actor.
Yeah, I get that too. Walton Goggins is he's a good actor. I like him.
And I'm kind of surprised that he's not been, like, in more, like, the lead in more movies. I guess he was in the recent Tomb Raider movie. And then he was in Justified, and I feel like, well, The Hateful Eight, which I had forgotten about actually. But yeah, I'm wanting to see him in more stuff.
Me too. He's a real good character actor.
Mm-hmm.
He does smarmy really well, just smarmy and sleazy.
Yeah.
And he's awesome. And I really know him as the guy from The Hateful Eight. He was in Maze Runner 3: The Death Cure earlier this year. It was not a good movie. He had nothing to do. Tomb Raider was boring, and he looked bored to be in it, but he was still doing his Walton Goggins thing. I wish he had more stuff to do. Oh well.
Yeah. Well, if that's all, then I guess what else do we have this year? We've got Venom, which I'm really looking forward to trashing that movie. Like earlier when you mentioned any Venom that you had towards the first Ant-Man movie, immediately I was thinking like, we are Venom, and I was just like, oh, I can't wait. Like I think that movie is going to be such garbage, but I think I'm going to be very entertained by us talking about it. And then like the Aquaman movie, which I keep forgetting exists. And you're going to watch Aquaman, right?
I watch everything.
Oh, sometimes I really pity you, but then I'm like, well, he does it to himself. No, I'm just kidding. I need to look this up. Movies 2018. Just to be sure I'm not like forgetting something. I'm not watching Jurassic World. See, I think most.
That movie was so dumb. Like, I can't even explain it. It is about as stupid. Like, I would put it in like the 10 dumbest screenplays ever to be made into big motion pictures. Like, we're talking like Inferno levels of dumb.
Oh.
Like, it's so stupid. I can't even like. I feel like my mind was rejecting it. Like, I was watching the movie and I just like every other scene I was like, wait, huh? How does that fit? And after I left the movie, I was like, what even happened in that movie? I'm trying to remember. I can remember images, but I can't articulate what happened in the story, and I feel like my brain was rejecting the movie.
I've never been a huge Jurassic Park fan, so like, but when I saw the trailer for this movie, I was like, oh, this looks dumb, because like, there's a scene where this dinosaur is like sneakily like opening a window quietly to like sneak into a house, and I was thinking like, what? Like, is this actually a ninja dinosaur that we're seeing on the screen? And like, I don't know if you ever watched The Critic, which was an animated show from the early to mid 90s, and there would be this.
I've seen clips.
Okay, so there would be like, he would say, okay, up next is my review of Jurassic Park 2, but The Critic happened in between Jurassic Park 1 and 2, so at that time, there was no Jurassic Park 2. And so then it shows a clip from the Critic version of Jurassic Park 2, which is different than the actual Jurassic Park 2, and it showed a scene of I'm sure I'm going to leave all this in the podcast, so everyone now is just like, why are they not talking about Ant-Man anymore? But anyway, so like they lock a raptor in a closet, and then like the scientist says, you can't do that, raptor's too smart, and the raptor slides the newspaper under the door and shakes the door so that the key falls on the newspaper, and then he pulls the paper back in to unlock the door. And a friend of mine was like, I was telling him about that, and he was like, that happens in the movie. And I was like, are you kidding me? And it's like, apparently something like that happens in this movie.
It's not a raptor, but it's a girl, like a little kid.
Oh, okay.
So basically a raptor. And then it is, oh my goodness. I guess I'm just going to talk about how dumb Jurassic World 2 is. I guess the people at Geekvolution call it Jurassic House. I think it's funny. I'd go one step further, and I call it Jurassic Mansion because it. Oh my goodness, and that part's so dumb. Oh my god. Okay, so James Cromwell's in the movie. Okay. You might know him as the farmer from Babe.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah, or he's been in Star. I know who he is. Yeah.
He's in Star Trek stuff.
Spider-Man 3.
So. Yeah, he's Captain Stacy from Star Trek. Spider-Man 3. He was not in Star Trek 3. But there's a. Oh my. Okay, I'm trying to like wrap my head around this. Okay, so James Cromwell shows up and he's like, me and John Hammond were business partners, and we came up with the original idea of Jurassic Park. You've never seen or heard about me in another movie, but this is what I do. You now know who I am. Look it, I have John Hammond's mosquito in sap cane. And then, but the thing is, like, I like James Cromwell. He's a good actor. He's actually giving an all right performance, but there are tells where you can tell that he does not care. One, he's like, I will be in your movie, but I will be sitting down at all times. So his character is in a wheelchair, and they like wheel him around the set so he can talk. And when he's not in a wheelchair, he is sitting in a bed. Oh, I'm sick. That's hilarious. Also, his granddaughter, who's the little kid in the movie, has a British accent, and the nanny has a British accent, but he doesn't have a British accent.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think his character was supposed to have a British accent, and he went, I'm not doing that. I am going to show up, I am going to sit down, and I am going to read my lines. Have me for 2 days.
That sounds like Star Trek The Dark World, where the blonde lady has an accent, and her dad does not.
That's exactly what it is. And Peter Weller, oh my god, that's funny. And then in this movie, he gets smothered to death. Oh, sorry, spoilers for Jurassic Mansion. He gets smothered to death at one point by a guy who looks like they really wanted to get Sam Rockwell, but he was too busy winning an Oscar to be in this stupid movie. So this not Sam Rockwell like picks up a pillow, and it's like James Cromwell said, nope, I don't feel like acting in a death scene. So what they do is it feels like a cheap student film where he picks up the pillow, turns around, and then walks towards James. He leaves the frame. And then it cuts to the cane falling over and shattering. And then I'm like, so did he die? Or what? Like, I didn't see a body. And then I'm like, oh no, that was the death scene, but James Cromwell didn't feel like filming it. So it's full of stuff like that, and it's hilarious.
That sounds really great. Like I said, I've never cared about Jurassic Park at all, and so it's sad to me that like people who actually like Jurassic Park don't like this movie. But then again, like when I'm looking at the trailers, I'm thinking like, it looks exactly like what they advertised it to be. Like this looks on par with Megalodon. With Jason Statham and
The Meg.
Yeah, like it looks about like the same quality of movie. So I hate to say it, but I'm not surprised that it didn't do well. So anyway, that has been our review of Ant-Man and the Wasp and Jurassic World 2, which Connor saw and I did not. So we will be back later this year to talk about Venom, which I'm really excited for, and Aquaman, which I have no idea what to expect with that. I don't know if it's going to be Suicide Squad bad or if it's going to be like Justice League enjoyable bad. Like there's a wide variety of bad that it could be. And I hate that I'm like I don't have expectations of it being good. But anyway, so that's going to be a thing. So we will be back sometime later this year. In the meantime, I am the Comics Kid 2099.
And I'm Conner Nielsen.
And we'll see you later. Have a good one.
Hello world, hear the song that we're singing. Come on, get happy. A whole lot of loving is what we'll be bringing. We'll make you happy.